Don't have my gavel, so I'll wrap the table and say that the Town of Pittsboro Planning Board meeting for January 16th, 2024, now in session. We have a quorum and welcome to all the board members. Wonderful to have you here. Carl Schaefer is away, so he's the only one who is absent. We have an agenda out. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion, we adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Frida. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ray. Motion proposed and seconded. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Do we have public commenters tonight? Has anyone signed up to speak? It appears not. So we will forego the public comment period and move on to the minutes from the December 18th, 2023 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to read through? Are there corrections or changes that need to be made before we vote to approve? Anything suggested? Do I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Frida. Second on the motion?
Second.
Thank you, Bill. Motion is up for a vote now. All in favor of approving the minutes? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Is there any old business to come up before the board? Anything that the members care to bring up? Well, we'll move on to new business then, which is a presentation on PB 23-527, 2313 and 2411 US Highway 64 West Business. And because Director Cahoon Tingle is not here, we will have a new face to the presentation podium. And it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Sanchez. I am the senior planner with the Town of Pittsburgh. And unfortunately, Randy cannot be here tonight. And so he has asked for me to fill in his stead to present on this topic. So in front of us, we have a presentation for application PB 23-527, which is going to be a conditional rezoning for light industrial from residential agriculture A2. It was prepared by Randy. However, under the current circumstances, I am now presenting this topic. The request is a legislative request by Nicholas Sharamet of 500 Westover Drive, Stanford, North Carolina. Has been submitted petitioning for a map amendment rezoning parcels, the following: 70062, parcel 83225, parcel 83226, parcel 83229, and parcel 6211 from their current classification of RA2 to M1, which is light industrial conditional rezoning. The combination of lots is approximately 11.18 acres. The project is located at 2313 and 2411 US Highway 64 West. The owner intends to utilize the site for a maximum of 100,000 square feet of enclosed storage space and maximum of 40 permanent parking space for boats and RVs. In terms of background, the site is due west from the recently approved Reese Farm development site. The owner in his application states intention is to preserve the rural and agricultural features in both the building and design and site implements. Vegetated buffers and fence will screen the facilities from both the roadway and adjacent property owners. South-facing roof will contain solar collectors for project electrification. The developer intends to limit operations to daylight hours. There will be no on-site employees. Customers will access the site via keypads. Nighttime lighting will be aimed downwards and is intended to be unobtrusive. In terms of just a slight presentation, what you have on the board is a proposed land use and the future. Yes, all right. So this is the current site location, as you can see there. It's going to be those parcels as kind of like in the L shape, and that's with the current land use, which is our A2. Next one, Jim. And this is the current land, this is the future land use that shows that the area is designated for residential land use, as well as with the hatching that is for natural resources conservation area. So it's more suited for that particular area. There's also a blue line stream that runs to the bottom of the property. And within that, there are some natural conservations within that area. Last one. This shows a projected change in land use to the proposed land use and how it interacts with what is the adopted future land use plan. In terms of staff recommendations, staff recommends a disapproval for the request as submitted. Their reason and discussion analysis is, despite claiming the proposal is consistent with the current land use plan, the site is shown in an area earmarked for residential development and tree conservation. The petitioner mentioned that the largest parcel in the development is currently in use as a commercial site. That commercial site in its current use is a existing non-conformity. The UDO requires parking lots such as the one proposed to be paved. The proposal is presenting for crushed rocks, which is currently not allowed under the current legislation. The project is better suited for a site farther out in the town's ETJ. Staff has consulted the applicant repeatedly and that this rezoning is inconsistent with the land use and that staff would be recommending against its approval. Additionally, conditions have been sent to the applicant, who I was informed did not accept the current conditions, which would be the most minor conditions that we would accept as a planning department. If there's any question for me, I'm free to take questions. There is not, and
Members, any questions for Mr. Sanchez? Is the applicant here? Do they wish to make a representation?
Yes, please.
Please introduce yourself.
Certainly, we can put the slide deck that I sent. Oh, thank you. Good evening, everybody, members of staff, members of the planning board. I appreciate this opportunity to speak in front of you. For those that don't know me, my name is Nicholas Schrammick, and it's my pleasure to engage with you tonight. Over the last 4 years, I've settled into this vibrant community of Pittsboro and its ETJ, broadening my commitment to the state of North Carolina for the last 15 years. My journey has allowed me to bear witness to the large transformation of our community, and with my background as a software engineer, a realtor, and a landowner, I've had the fortune of experiencing these changes from multiple perspectives. We're on the brink of significant developments in Pittsboro, and those developments are both thrilling as they are critical to be thoughtfully considered. I'm here to present my development plans and to foster a robust conversation with all of you, hoping to address any inquiries you might have. Thank you for this opportunity to share and discuss my plans with you.
Board member questions?
Yeah.
The architectural renderings are really handsome, and there's no doubt that all of us need more storage. All you need to do is look in my shed and my basement, and it's pretty clearly evident. I think you've got a wonderful plan, but it looks to me that the consistency with the Pittsboro land use plans just don't track.
So looking at some of the documents that were sent over earlier and stuff. Is this currently residential or is this commercial and stuff?
Currently is zoned residential. Eric, do you want to speak to that? Because you've been through all of the plat maps on this.
Yeah, that was a little.
I believe it. Currently, it's zoned residential, A2, and what is the future land use, which is what we're talking about, is it's going to be zoned again for residential use. The specification for what sort of residential use has been determined is just saying overarchingly it is zoned for future preservation as residential as well as tree conservation.
I'm saying some of the documents that we got.
Yeah, if you go to exhibit 4, which document that I presented, I think it's the one there.
This one?
Yeah.
The other packet. Yep, that packet right there. The one that starts with from members of the board.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that one right.
Yes, got it.
So exhibit 4 in here, this is part of the 2023 update, page 21 of the land use plan. And here you have the gray arrow going to the orange box on US 64 Business West, denoting that as a commercial space. It's currently being used as a surveying office. The next exhibit shows the zoning compliance certificate that I have before I purchased that property. So it's currently being used as a commercial space, that 4 acres.
Yeah, and we agree that it's currently being utilized as a commercial space, but as noted, it's currently a non-conforming resident, currently non-conforming use. So either way, it is not in compliance with the existing land use, but because it's something that was adopted prior to, or has been utilized prior to the adoption of the plan, it still is non-conforming.
So that's where I just don't know, I just didn't understand. So if it was zoned commercial,
No, it's zone residential currently.
It's own residential, but it is not conforming. It's using it.
so that's where like this exhibit 4
Right,
and the application
right.
contradict that. And I don't know,
We just recreated the land use. When did we,
It was just reapproved, what, 2 years ago?
years ago, something like that.
About 2 years ago.
like you take someone that was approved commercial.
No, it was never.
No, it was never approved.
They just pitched up a business on residential property.
That was gonna be my question, is
Right.
how that became non-conforming. This is exhibit 5 in that document.
Right.
Yeah, it looked like it was then approved.
It was never approved.
It was never approved because it didn't fall within any,
It says it was denied in 20,
about two.
And then approved
permit amended by, per planning director to.
2 months later. So denied here. That's trying to understand like the timeline and stuff.
Right.
So if it was residential and then got approved commercial and then we adopted a new.
So zones,
It's still zone residential.
zoning of it has never changed.
What
It
was
was a
it?
violation of the PUD.
Right,
You prove it, correct?
correct.
Even though they're using it as commercial, it was just never approved to be commercial. It's always still been residents, and we didn't change that.
And with the adoption of the future land use plan or the land use plan that is current now, general statutes requires that we follow that land use plan, that part of any decision making, and it has to be consistent with the land.
My question
This
is, if something had a prior designation, we approved the land use plan, the UDOs, and so we're now operating under that. There's no grandfather clause, is there?
Well, in a way, it's the current non-conformity. We cannot change it unless the applicant comes in this case and say, hey, we want to change it and change it to something else. But if they continue to operate as the commercial, they are allowed to, but it has to be that same use. But
Has the applicant purchased this land yet?
Yes, I've owned it for 3.5 years
So you've owned it for 3.5 years.
and operating that as,
When was the commercial building built? Do we know?
that was part of Flint Farm. So that was a long time ago. That used to be operated as a nursery for Flint Farm. So all of this property on one of the maps that are in consideration were
It was a farming operation with a nursery, just,
correct. And that was their storefront for all their goods and services that they would sell out of Flint Farm. And then this was then presented to me as a ability to then allow use of surveying business to be conducted out of existing buildings. And that was the compliance that.
my understanding with the town is that it's not grandfathered in. Is that a correct statement?
the current use as it currently stands,
Not the current residential.
no, the current commercial use as it currently stands with the current use under the current structure, yes. The moment you go in and modify it, it becomes, you have to.
You have to-
Back to
If they continue to operate what Clint was doing, then it will continue to stay and that grandfathered in. But if they come in and they want to do something else, which is what's happening now, he's here, he wants to change all of that to the storage building. And then he cannot do that because now it's non-conforming.
And all you need to do is zoning change.
Right,
That's what he's asking.
right, and that's what he wants, that's all they change.
Make your mind.
Yes, and I'd also like to notch, or to remind the members, both of the board as well as the audience, that any decision that is made against the future land use plan sets precedent for any future application that comes forward, whether it is someone rezoning from a residential to commercial, commercial to residential, industrial to anything else. And it then becomes effective the moment the board and then the BOC makes that decision.
Right, I think Eric makes a very good point. The town board wants this to be used residentially in the future. There is one non-conforming tenant on the land. And the question is, do we move to approve a use that is inconsistent with the town board's land use plan? Or do we stick with the land use plan as has been approved by the town board and recommend this not be approved? So that's essentially what's in front of us.
Mhm.
I think that we have to stick with
I don't see how we can approve it unless
I'm still a little
If I
confused.
can,
town has it.
If I can-
It's to change it, but we don't.
about 2012, Chatham Park came into
Yes.
Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
They had a outside firm come in, I believe it was 2014. Chatham Park paid $20,000. And they said you cannot do anything about Chatham Park because you don't have the UDOs, you don't have the information, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I think you were on the planning board at the time.
Mm.
So they forced the town to basically write a use plan and get that up to date and the UDOs for all the development order.
Okay,
That's probably where all these rules now that we're looking at came from.
yeah,
So this was probably just put in, it was a farm, rural, no one cared, opened it up and it became what it is.
Mhm.
I'm guessing or supplementing on that. If I'm
Sure.
wrong, please.
Yeah, before I purchased the property, this is the document, the zoning compliance certificate, allowing me to use those structures on there as a surveying office. And this was from the former planning director that actually approved this. So before I even purchased the property, I had this document and thought I was in compliance of operating a surveying office, which that's currently what's there today.
But that would be a lot different than operating a
Correct.
storage unit.
Right.
Correct.
But Ray, what happened was, as I understand it, I wasn't part of the planning director's decision on this. It was, all right, you got a little business there, wink, wink. There's no traffic, surveyors work out of the back of their pickup truck and they got the transit and they got all the other stuff back there. And it's not presenting a commercial front. It's, you could run a business like this out of the garage, but behind your house real easily. So wink, wink, that was allowed to go forward. But there was never a conditional zoning change made. It was just, well, we'll turn our heads for the time being and Mr. Schrammick bought the property, under that understanding.
And even
That it could be, so today, if you wanted to do a surveying office, then you probably could.
Well, I'm not sure that it could legally change hands.
If he chose now, because he has that paperwork, to put in a landscaping office, could he get away, or a surveying office?
He has that right now, right?
It's
That's
there.
what he's doing now.
It's,
I like to
Well,
remind that
I think
they
we're
are not asking for the change.
We are.
This,
Using that specific building or that specific property is 5 parcels in total.
right.
Not just one specific parcel that is the non-conformance.
We're getting down in the weeds looking at a tree. What we're
Can I
talking
make a
about,
comment?
do we rezone 11
Can I make-
acres or not? Go
Can I
ahead.
make a comment?
Yes, sir.
My understanding is that we're bound by the PUD.
Correct.
Right.
The town can change it if they want.
If they want to, yeah,
We don't have that authority.
right.
Therefore, my understanding, we don't have a choice but to deny it. Then it goes to the town. If they want to approve it, that's great.
And they could.
Does that
And
make
they-
sense?
Then they,
Recommend approval if it is in the best interest of the board and if the board.
Yeah, But we don't have the authority to do that.
You have the.
well, we could, yeah, we could,
nothing
could
technical.
recommend, throwing out the town's land.
I'm just
And use consistency.
If the concerns or the wink, wink, nod, nod was because there's not a lot of traffic there, there's not a lot of business going on at this existing business that can happen and stuff.
But that will change if he put a storage building. It will be.
Really? Sure.
I mean, like, so I didn't spend last week just.
I think that-
stuff, and there was,
I
Yeah.
think that whole, from being the nursery to the land surveying business, the building itself did not change,
But it will, if
but this will.
this will change it completely. It will
And
change the
beyond
whole
that-
everything.
Beyond that, I think we're getting much further off. Eric made the
Yeah.
great point that we'd be setting a precedent
Right.
of going against the future zoning.
So if I may, my name is Landon Lovelace. I'm the president at Underfoot Engineering. I've been helping Mr. Schrammick for the last couple of years since he bought the property, just looking at things that could be done with the property. This was before the land use plan came in. There's a lot of good questions that are brought up, and I think, Nick, you still had a presentation to give. We kind of jumped into questions, which is great, but also I know you spent a lot of time on the presentation, so I just wanted to bring that up so Mr. Schrammick can give that presentation. But there's a couple of questions that probably want answers now, and maybe Teresa can help. looking at the current UDO. So there's a few things here. Land zoning and land use and what use is on there can be two separate things. And there's a lot of zoning designations that are residential, RA2, where you're allowed to do a business. Okay, and most of the time, if you do that, you have to get a special use permit, or you have to get some separate letter that would say, this is zoned for residential, but you're allowed to run a business, whether it be a storefront for a landscape company or a farm or a survey or a daycare, things like that. So that's not new. Oftentimes you can do some sort of home business or other business in something that would be zoned residential. So this does have a track record. I mean, Flint Farm was there for a good while before you bought it. That's one point. And maybe Eric or Teresa can look up in the current RA2 zoning. Would a professional services firm like a surveying building, would that be an allowable use for the special use permit? Because I don't have that. I don't have the new ordinance memorized yet. But that's maybe an important distinction. Either way, the bigger point is a land use plan just got redone, right? And it was years in the making, and a lot of public meetings, a lot of public input. And it does set a precedence if you go against that land use plan. And land use plans are planning documents that are looked at from 10,000 foot and then zoomed in, right? If you drive right down the road, which the site is right down the road, there's a reason why it was designated as conservation and residential, because a lot of the land that's around there, I think it was on one of the slides earlier. If you look at the site itself, Robeson Creek runs behind it.
Right.
A lot of floodplain. There's a lot of stuff like that. Naturally, you would say, yes, that's conservation area, right? We don't want to go in there. I think because the history of that parcel was RA2, which if you go outside any developed city center, most of the rural stuff is just zoned R1 or RA2. You can go in Chatham County right now. And until they put initial zoning designations on everything 5 or 6 years ago, stuff way out in the county was just zoned as a rural agricultural residential, right? So I say that because you would set a precedent if you went against the land use plan, but and y'all may disagree with this, but I work in a lot of municipalities local to the triangle where we ask for a rezoning, and even if it's not consistent with the land use plan, there's a second part of the rezoning that says we're going to amend the land use plan. Because when we're looking at it from 10,000 feet, we just don't have the granular detail that we need to look at to see if it's appropriate for the specific site, right? So you've driven past that. It's an 11-acre site that's got about 350 feet of depth. If it were residential, based off the current RA2, it's probably an acre lot or bigger. You might be able to get 5 or 6 houses there. You can't put driveways off of the bypass, right? Because DOT wouldn't allow that. So you may have one driveway that come in and have like a rear alley behind the houses or something. But that's about what could be there. Maybe 5, 6, 7 houses, right? If it were developed under the current RA2 zone. Is that what we want? Is it possible that in the whole process, even though there was hundreds of hours spent on the land use plan, that not every single micro level of parcel was looked at? I mean, and this is something that planning can speak to better than I can, but it is not abnormal to have a rezoning that coincides with a change to a land use map, even if it's just newly updated. It's very typical. Because you have to look at the merits of each plan. So thank you for letting me interject.
Understood.
You still want to do your presentation or? Okay.
You see the slides too? Yes, they do. They have the slides in front of them. That's right. Sure. Thank you. The key highlights of this project, aesthetically pleasing design, sustainability and resource efficiency, community and economic advantages. We believe that this project not only aligns with the town's development goals, but also provides a unique opportunity to demonstrate that a much needed storage facility can be architecturally pleasing and complementary to the surrounding areas, as well as environmentally sensitive and resource efficient. You go to the next slide, please. So there's kind of three key tenants. Anytime you're building residential or commercial property, there's kind of three key tenants: location, filling a need, and benefit to the public in town. And that's where I'm going to go through that packet that I gave you guys. If everyone can go to exhibit 1 for me, that'd be great. So currently where this is positioned, it's a map with a bunch of colorful dots on it. We're within 5 miles of Chatham Park, Disney Asteria, Turkey Creek, and the Reeves Farm that just newly got approved. At the bottom of that key, it shows you each property and how many dwellings and square feet of commercial space that they're going to have. We're looking at between 24 and 28,000 homes, 24 million square feet of non-residential space. Storage is going to be something needed by the families that move here and also the businesses that occupy Pittsboro proper. We go to the next slide. Exhibit 2. Sorry. I misspoke. Thank you. We're going to be less than a half a mile away from the newly proposed. So there's a green dotted line on exhibit 2, and then that green triangle is where this location currently is. We're going to be a half a mile away from the proposed connecting 15501 South. That's going to connect from 64 Business West down to 15501. That's going to complete the circle around Pittsboro and probably bring a lot more traffic into that area, as well as Reeves Farm that's going to be newly created. You go to the next exhibit. These are the vehicle counts currently in front of the build sites. 4,200 cars currently pass by this build site every day. And again, with Reeves Farm and everything else that's happening in Pittsboro, that count could double, triple, or even quadruple on 64 Business West. The next one below that is 15,500 cars. If you just go past the US 64 interchange, it's 15,500 cars that go between Pittsboro and Siler City. We're located 2 miles from downtown, and we're near the western edge of the ETJ. And again, we can skip the next two. We just kind of went over those. So this is a map of the ETJ. That arrow is where this property is located. And I'm not sure how much farther out in the ETJ you could possibly go with a property like this, being at the western edge of it. So that's kind of location. From everything that I see here, it says that this is the right location and a good location for this. Filling a need, as I said, the neighboring property, the Reeves Farm, 1,700 homes, 1 million square feet of commercial space. That's going to bring new people and new businesses to that area. Regional growth, as I said, Disney Asteria, Turkey Creek, Chatham Park. If we go to the next, we have 7A and 7B. So I purchased a study that was done in 2021. This kind of looked at what the storage needs of Pittsboro were at that time. And this was previous to this property being approved, Turkey Creek and Disney Asteria. At that time, they were looking at about 80,000 square feet of needed storage space. With these new developments online, again, that could double or triple in the need for storage in this area. In the 7B, those are all the current storage facilities within 5 miles of that area. As you can see, they're pretty much all fully occupied. I know many of folk that can't find somewhere to put a boat or put storage. Storage Cafe did a survey. So Storage Cafe is a group of 25,000 storage owners nationwide. 38% of Americans reported in 2021 that they needed self-storage, which is almost 40% of the American population. So we've gone over location and filling a need. The last one is benefit to the public in town. So from a resource efficiency standpoint, we're looking to use none of the town's water, sewer, and or electricity. Environmental considerations will be done through solar power and retaining as much natural foliage and trees as possible. Aesthetic harmony, we've seen the design plans. My goal with this was if someone came from out of town, were to drive by it, it looks like a farm with some cool solar panels on it. No one would ever know that actually is a storage building. Community amenity. Again, as I said and reiterated many times, folks are going to need storage in Pittsboro. And then last but not least, tax revenue to the town without using any resources from the town.
Has a question. So currently it's 4,200 people that drive by there.
Yep.
How many people come into a storage unit?
So it's, they did a study on that 25,000 nationwide storage owners. They do surveys to see what traffic studies are. It's 7 trips per 100 units. So, on a storage facility that had 500 units, you might be looking at 35 per day. Over a 12-hour period, that's less than 2 folks, 2 to 3 folks an hour. So it's a very low, storage is a very low impact commercial business.
That's what I was trying to put in my head, but that's a good way to put it in numbers.
Any other questions from board members for Mr. Schrammick?
Yeah, the 40 spots, I don't know if I saw it on any of the
Which one?
the 40 spaces for both RVs. I don't think I saw anything that included where that might be rendering.
It's probably in the dissent from the town staff.
I looked at it.
There's a diagram in there that shows.
Are you agreeing to pave his property?
Okay, I see.
What's that? Yeah, so if you've got this one up. So there's the 40 spots are right here in the top area.
Are you planning on paving this property?
Yes.
Are you gonna get in trouble with impervious surface?
No. Well, actually.
I assume that's what the storm.
Speak to that. My civil engineer can speak to that, but.
Yeah, I can speak to that real quick. And I know that Randy mentioned that as one of the things in his approval, that the rendering is shown as gravel. But that the ordinance required it to be paved. We have no problem paving it. Part of the gravel was to lend itself towards the environmental consideration to do gravel with under drains. It's like development and helps capture and treat more stormwater runoff where it falls. But ultimately, we also understand that paving is good, and from a long-term maintenance perspective, it tends to have less problems. Either way, and I think it was some of the conditions in the conditional use zoning, there's specifics in there that says that have to meet a number of things. One of those is the town of Pittsburgh's stormwater management ordinance. So any of the impervious that gets put down would end up being captured, treated, detained in accordance with any state requirements.
Rick?
Just a couple my and I turn to work with Teresa as a assistant planning director. I think from a planning standpoint, the planning department does agree that there might and current research does show that there is evidently a need for storage. That's not an issue for us. We're just saying, is this the right place? And is it worth going against the consistency of the land use plan for one? 2, the applicant's land has to be annexed into the city. So in terms of economic viability to the town, there isn't relevant because it's not a tax base for us. 3rd, in terms of the terms of conditions for the conditional rezoning, the applicants has still not agreed to the terms as yet either. But I turn over to my assistant director.
Teresa?
To touch on a few items that have been brought up and speak to the land use plan consistency and logistics of the project. So first, it's not consistent with the land use plan, which is a fairly new plan. The land use plan designates this area as residential. It's located in the ETJ outside of city limits where you would typically see a lot of the commercial type of development take place. The proposed rezoning is non-residential. Staff determines that would be an unreasonable impact to the existing area, which is residential. There would be additional traffic on this part of the road, more stop and go traffic. It also does not fit the character of the area, which is low density, rural type development. And a conservation or rural type of subdivision would be the type of use that is designated in the land use plan for this area. Logistically, warehouses can pretty much go anywhere. Mini storage can go anywhere. There are activity nodes in the more rural areas of either town or even in the county that can be looked at. There's no particular reason that it would need to go in this area. So logistically, it's not needed. If you look at the first page of the handout, you can actually see a couple of the activity nodes that the land use plan designates. It's those red circles. So typically you would see the rural or residential areas in the ETJ, which is the large yellow colors, and the light green. So the red would signify the commercial. So there are some areas that town could foresee there being some commercial development, but what we're trying to not create is setting a precedence for sprawl, leapfrog development. The larger the property that you rezone, the more likely that there's going to be additional rezoning. So with this being over 11 acres, it's pretty significant size. You also want to take into consideration spot zoning. So when you rezone property, if everything around it's residential and you drop something that's different in there, you got to think of a few things for it to even be legal spot zoning, which is it consistent with our plans? No, it's not. Is it benefiting the entire community? Or is it benefiting more of the property owner, what the property owner wants to have happen on the property? And then again, the size. So if you take a small piece of property, you rezone it, and you can think of logistically why that makes sense, that's gonna have a much better chance of withstanding a court case, let's say. The larger the property, the more it goes against our plans, is more likely to not be upheld in a court system. So again, we don't want to create that precedent. The purpose of the land use plan is to protect certain areas of town. So the ETJ has that natural ambience, the rural character. So again, this would be going against that in this part of the town's ETJ, which we want to also mention it's a 3-mile ETJ. So this isn't, right outside of town. Our ETJ is pretty significant. Most towns of this size only have a 1-mile ETJ. So the farther out you go, the more rural it is. So lastly, like Eric said, we're trying not to set this precedent. And if you have any questions, logistically for us, we'll be happy to answer them, but staff recommendation is to not approve this rezoning.
Any board questions for the Assistant Planning Director? Well, I'm call for a motion. Do we move to approve this project and go contrary to the land use plan? Or do we deny and
I actually had some questions.
go right ahead.
Yeah, sorry. In some of like the rationale of increased traffic, I think that the studies that he presented maybe contradict that. And the need, if everything's at, I don't know, I'm sorry, we got a lot of paper here, but one of the just said 95% capacity, and those are all 6 miles out, you're at 95% capacity, and we're adding all these homes since, in this area, are we just asking people to drive farther to do this? Have these services. And again, I'm not an architect or anything, but it looks nice. Kind of set back in the area. I've driven down this section of road multiple times and stuff. So I just don't see those.
So again, with this being a use that does not require pretty much any infrastructure from the town, it can go in many different locations. I'm sure you've seen other storage facilities that are located in more county rural areas outside of.
Yeah.
So logistically, is it the highest and best use for this property and for this portion of the town? And when talking about our rezoning, that's what we're looking at. So is it needed? It could be a need. Is it needed in this specific location? And is that what's best per the land use plan? And for the town of Pittsburgh's needs are two different questions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we do have other locations that are, zoned industrial currently and that would allow this use. So it's,
What is the best use of that current space to be a survey area? Where you can maybe pull one driveway in?
so this
You know.
this fell under that approval in 2020 fell under the old zoning ordinance.
Okay,
So that was even before we had a UDO, a Unified Development Ordinance. So I'd have to go back and see. The only thing I could think of is maybe in the RA2, it allowed some sort of small rural commercial. Or maybe it was looked at as accessory to the like a use, an office use that was accessory, that could be looked at as accessory to the nursery. I'd have to go back and do some digging to find out for sure how it got approved back then.
sure, yeah.
I don't think it would be allowed in the UDO today, but we can double check on that. But yeah, with that being zoned residential, I don't foresee office being a permitted use in that district.
Okay,
We can double check that.
so they could turn into a residential development, but they couldn't turn into a different commercial?
And we actually presented the Flint Farm. I know they changed their name a couple of times. And they did get preliminary plat approval, if I remember correctly, a couple of years ago, and that was for a large lot conservation subdivision.
And would they have sewers coming down that far and stuff like that?
Probably septic.
You think so?
It had to be septic, so we didn't go that far out.
There's a force main, but it cannot be.
But they're coming down to the adjacent property though, right? The Reeves Chapel, I mean, sewers are coming down next door to them, right? But then, aren't they?
It's a,
Not really an issue. That's-
as close. I mean, in the future, infrastructure can be expanded. And that is something that we can plan for.
Yeah, I understand. It's a tough, pill to swallow for someone who lives next door and said you have to still be residential. The group next to you, some ton of money and be residential, get all these benefits. You're not gonna take anything from the town, but you can't do anything with this area that you currently operate a business out of, except for wait to maybe get that, have residential development,
It can be residential development, correct?
right? But not with the same, utilities and stuff. I know, yeah, that's just what I'm seeing here.
It's located outside of our utility service area.
Right.
So they could have septic.
Right. I'm just saying they're really close to adjacent of a really large group that was afforded that opportunity, but they wouldn't be. So they have to kind of sit on it.
Right, which, that, if you're discussing Reeves Farm, that is located in an area that is closer into town. They are expanding the infrastructure. There is going to be mixed use to it. And I think they're bringing, if I remember correctly, 1,900 dwelling units. So it's a completely
Oh, yeah, you're right.
different type of
Sure, yeah.
request when you're considering pros versus cons for the,
Right.
development of,
Just, yeah.
and it's also located within one of the activity nodes too.
Yeah.
So the proposed commercial is consistent with the land use plan.
All right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, as Teresa reminded us, our remit is to, as a town board, look at what is best for the town and its future, as opposed to, how might we satisfy any applicant, no matter how fine the renderings and the plans might be. It's a question of, are we going to be consistent with our land use plan as it's been written and approved by the town board? Or are we going to recommend that the board go against that? So let's have a motion.
I make a motion to deny.
Motion to deny for Mr. Carney. Do I have a second? Second. Second from Mr. Baker. All in favor of denying this use? Aye.
Aye.
Eric, I'm not allowed to vote.
You're not allowed to vote tonight. Okay.
Clarify.
All right. So all opposed would have this go forward with a non-conforming use, okay. So 3-1, this is denied on the basis of inconsistency with the town's land use plans. And so we will send it over to the town board. Any updates? Teresa, are you doing administrative updates for us?
Just a few items. We're hiring another planner too. So soon we'll be a department of 6. We're looking at applications right now. We're going to a zoning officials conference in February. North Carolina zoning officials. And we are looking at updating our OpenGov software. We're trying to get as many applications to be submitted through OpenGov as possible. And we're looking at reorganizing all of our filing to go to OpenGov as well. So a lot going on administratively. The next planning board meeting will have several UDO text amendments for you to consider. And we're also looking at the school of government bringing training to the board in the February-March time period. So we'll keep you guys in the loop with that on when that's going to be. And lastly, just wanted to say congratulations to the reappointments, Charity and Alfredo.
Thank you, Teresa. Any further comments from the board?
No, I don't.
No? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
During
Motion.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.